Before I get started, just a couple things. One of them is I passed out my card and a little sheet that has a couple websites and dates on it. If you didn't get one, please pick one up before you leave. Also, I am an attorney. I'm a practicing attorney. When I'm speaking to people who are not attorneys, I tend to feel like I need to maybe educate you. Attorneys have a tendency to use words and think about the judicial system in certain terms because we deal with it all the time. Because they want me to limit my time, I'm going to move quickly through some of the educational parts of this, because what I really want to talk to you about is judicial accountability and retention election issues in Tennessee, because 2014 is going to be a big year. All of the county judges are going to be up because judges run in 8-year terms. So we will have county judges up for election. Plus, what's really important is all of the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court justices will be on the ballot to retain or replace. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit about the judiciary. And as everybody knows, there's 3 branches of government. We all know that here. There's a legislative, executive, and judicial branch. The legislature makes the law, so the judges are supposed to apply the law. And then the executive branch is supposed to enforce the law. But in Tennessee, this is very important. In our Constitution, we have some really strong language about the people's rights. And it reads that all power is inherent in the people. All free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. So, there's a 4th branch of government in Tennessee, the people branch. And what is our job? Our job is to alter, reform, or abolish the government as we may deem proper. Our Tennessee judiciary has the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court. There are appellate courts, and then there's the trial court levels, and that's what most people kind of think of. But there's some other things associated with it. There's what's called the Administrative Office of the Courts, which administers the court system. There is also a Board of Judicial Conduct, which is the governing board of the judges. There is the Board of Professional Responsibility, which controls the licensure of attorneys. And then there's the state court system, and there's a lot of other sort of quasi-judicial roles. Now, as I'm just kind of glancing over that right now, but I want you to remember that, because an important part of what I'm going to talk to you about is the insulation of the system. The judges are elected for 8-year terms. You have to be an attorney to be a judge. Again, they control the AOC, the Board of Judicial Conduct, and the licensure of attorneys. Oh, I know, yes. The Supreme Court appoints our Attorney General. So who does the Attorney General work for? He works for the Supreme Court. The legislature, how does that overplay into the judicial branch? The legislature has the power to impeach under our Constitution. They also have the power to remove, and nobody ever talks about that. But I'm going to introduce you to that in just a few minutes. They also can control the jurisdiction of the courts, and they are supposed to be approving any Supreme Court rule before it is enforced. The executive branch, which is the governor, of course, has the right to appoint judges. The people, we elect the judges. Very important. It's an important right that we have under our Constitution and other laws in this state. Now I want to introduce you to some real interesting characters in our judicial branch. First of all, there's Judge Richard Baumgartner. Judge Baumgartner was appointed to be a judge in 1992 by the governor. And after almost 20 years sitting on the bench, he was finally stepped down after he pled guilty in March 2011 to felony official misconduct. And why? Because he was buying pills off of one of his probationers in criminal court. Now, this man sat on the bench for years while people knew this was going on. And there's some real tragic stories about things that happened to people who were victims of crime and were sitting in his courtroom and trying to get cases prosecuted. In 2013, a very brave attorney in the Knoxville area was trying to get the TBI to be forced to release this file so you could see what else had happened. And guess what? A judge said, no, the common law and constitutional right of access to our courts are due great respect, though they do not outweigh law enforcement privilege. There is no way we can find out what else happened. How about Judge Hagler? Judge Hagler is down in the Chattanooga area. In 2008, a Tennessee judge resigned last month after making recordings of fantasies so lurid that when the tape fell into the hands of the police and the FBI, they thought they were listening to a torture session and believed it'd be linked to a murder. This tape, it's important here, had been investigated for 2 years while the man still sat on the bench. Now, I will tell you, when it finally came out in the paper in 2008 that he had resigned from the bench, it was silent. Silent. There was one article in the paper. Nobody ever found out what that tape was about. I have investigated some other things that I think it's related to, but we haven't been able to get that exposed yet. How about Judge James Taylor? 2012. Judge Taylor was sitting as a General Sessions judge in East Tennessee, and he was indicted on 41 counts of theft for false claims for legal services. Now, guess who he was billing? The state of Tennessee. He was sitting on the bench as a judge and billing the state of Tennessee, saying that he had been appointed as the lawyer to hear the very cases that he was the judge on. When complaints were filed against him at the Board of Judicial Conduct, his cases were retired so that he would step down from the bench. Oh, David Lanier, this kind of the one that I have some memory of, back when I first started practicing law, 1993. Well, in 2011, it was in the paper that Judge Lanier was soliciting support for a federal pardon. He said he had been unfairly treated. Nowhere in the world is anyone being punished like I am for what I did. He was convicted in federal court for civil rights violations and assault. And why? Because he was selling sex for custody decisions. How do we govern the judges in Tennessee? That is a real issue. Our legislators have the authority to do certain things. And when I started speaking to the legislature in 2008, I had to educate them. I'm going to tell you right now, our legislators are scared to death of the judicial branch. They are scared to death of them. Our legislators are insurance people and teachers and firemen, and they have a judge or an attorney walk the halls of the legislature and lobby against the citizens, which I will tell you they have done, and I have seen them do it, and they're scared to death. They have the power to impeach and to remove. Impeachment is controlled by, discussed in Article 5 of our Constitution. It is prosecuted by the House, tried by the Senate, and the Chief Justice is the one who hears it. Our last impeachment proceeding was 1954. Removal is under Article 6 of the Constitution. It takes a 2/3 vote of the House and Senate, and it is not a trial. And I went to the legislators and I said, you don't have to impeach a judge. All you have to do is give him notice of what the charges are, give him 10 days notice, call him before a joint session of the House and Senate, and vote. And with the 2/3 vote, he is gone. Last removal, 1994, and it was Judge Lanier. There are federal ways that a judge can be prosecuted criminally, which is USC 242 and 241. This is what Judge Lanier was ultimately prosecuted on. And this is a violation of a constitutional right under the color of law. And a conspiracy to do that is 10 years. But it has to be prosecuted by the federal attorney general. Complaints against judicial misconduct. Now this is everyday citizen. This is how does a litigant who's going through the courtroom bring up a complaint for a judge? They have to file a complaint. It goes to the Board of Judicial Conduct. Well, who's on the Board of Judicial Conduct? 13 judges and attorneys and 3 lay people. Now here, let's talk about the reality of judicial discipline in Tennessee. Judge Kraft out of Shelby County is the chairman. Judge Easter right here in Williamson County is the vice chair. The liaison to the legislature is Judge Jeff Bivens. Now, I think Jeff Bivens is a really nice guy. I've worked in front of his courts. He's been appointed by the governor twice to serve as a trial judge. He's been appointed to serve on the Court of Appeals, and now he is the liaison to the legislature. When I went to the legislature in 2008, I says, y'all need a liaison. You need somebody with the legislature to go find out what the judicial branch is doing. And as I'm going to show you in just a minute, all that bill got watered down, and so that the judicial branch continues to be in charge of their own reporting mechanism. This board is supposed to support Rule 10 of the Supreme Court rules, which is judicial conduct. And then they're supposed to follow under TCA 17. They're supposed to look at if they were in their official capacity, if it was a repeat occurrence. I'm going to flip through these kind of quickly because I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but I want you to look at this number right here where it says 330 complaints filed. This is 2006 and 7. 63% of those complaints were on civil cases. The reason I put that in there is because when I went up and told the legislature nothing's happening with these complaints, somebody from the judiciary came in and said, oh, all those complaints are people in prison, they're complaining about too many bologna sandwiches. I said, no, they're not. Over half of them are coming from civil cases. No removals. 2008 and 9, 348 complaints. 2009 and 10, 344 complaints. 10, 11, 359. 2011, 2012, 355. We're not getting any better. Our judiciary is not training any better. We're not getting any better. And with all these complaints consistently, not one time has there been a request to impeach or remove a judge. The voice of the people. Now, why should you care? There are some people in this room who have probably had to deal with the court system, and there's probably a lot of you who have not. When I pulled the budget, just so that I could give you some real numbers to work with, $122 million of your money goes into the court system. On top of that, $71 million goes to the district attorney generals, $42 million to the public defenders. So you add all that up and you've got about $250 million of your tax dollars going into the court system. That doesn't even touch the hundreds of thousands and millions of private dollars that people have to spend just to get justice. In the court report for 2011-2012, 130,068 cases were civil cases and 172,000 were criminal cases. In that 130,000 cases, there's at least two people, because there's a plaintiff and a defendant, so you've got 300,000, 500,000 people every year filing cases. And those cases don't usually end in a year. So you take that, you double or triple that because cases take 2 or 3 years to prosecute. You've got 2 or 3 million people every year going through the court system. And what happens? People's rights are violated. Their constitutional rights, the judges violate the law, they violate the judicial code, they abuse their power. Now, here's about the history of what I've tried to do. In 2007 was the first approach to the legislature. It was not me. It was 7 women who were in different parts of the states who went to a committee called the Family and Children Affairs Committee. John DeBerry, Sherry Jones, Mike Turner are on it. And they talked about the social injustice that was happening in the domestic courts. And this is all on streaming video, and I have watched that video, and these are horrible, horrible, sad stories. In the beginning or near the end of 2007, 2008, I got into a little run-in with a judge. And I had a domestic case down in Williamson County, and the judge just kept violating constitutional rights, just walking all over him, And finally, I put my foot down, and I wrote a letter to another attorney, and I said, what this judge is not right, it's not enforceable because he flat out violated due process. Well, the next time we appeared in court, that attorney took that letter, and he goes, Judge, she says you violated her constitutional rights. That judge's face got bright red. He told me he made us have this kind of quasi-hearing regarding that. Well, within 2 weeks, he issued an order that I was going to be held in contempt. He called me into the courtroom. He appointed the district attorney, your tax dollars, to prosecute me. He used your tax dollars to hire a court reporter to sit in the court reporter while I was in there. We had a trial that he sat as the judge. He then found me in contempt of court. I said, well, I'd like to be heard on bond. Now, bond, you know anything about criminal law, bond is an appearance obligation. So by our Constitution, you have a reasonable bond. Are you going to appear the next time you come to court? What do you look at? Whether or not they're a stable person. I own a home in Williamson County. I have a business in Williamson County. I have children in school in Williamson County. And he made me post a cash bond to get out of jail. Did that for one reason, of course, because he wanted me to be handcuffed and taken out of the courtroom. And so I wasn't happy about that. So I went to the legislature and I took some people with me. And we began to talk about what was occurring. Our first visit was in February. Our second visit was in March. I think our third visit was in April. By the time we got to our third visit in front of the legislature, Representative Mike Turner, I need to move on here because I've got these up here. Representative Mike Turner says on streaming video, when are we going to start impeachment? Within 30 days, Chief Justice Barker was sitting in the office of Mike Turner. Within another 30 days, that particular judge announced that he was stepping down from the bench. And I will say, he had just been elected in 2006, and this was 2008. 2009, 2010, more people, more litigants are going to the legislature talking about what's going on. We're gaining sympathy from some of the legislators. Our champion, Senator May Beavers, the head of the Judiciary Committee, set up a joint committee, special joint committee in October 2010. We had probably 12 different speakers go in and talk about things that had occurred. In 2012, we finally, after talking about it, we were going to introduce a new bill, and this new bill was going to be to create a stronger judicial accountability in which the legislature would have greater oversight. May Beavers introduced that bill. It got into the hands of Senator Mike Falk. Senator Mike Falk got it watered down, and it basically became a distinction without a difference. It changed from the Court of the Judiciary to the Board of Judicial Conduct. It's still controlled by the judges, and the liaison is a judge. What happened? 2013, Senator May Beavers got axed. She was taken totally off the Judiciary Committee, and what happens to Senator Mike Falk? The governor appoints him as a judge. The Family and Children Affairs Committee, which I will tell you was the best committee for the people. That was the committee that people could go to, and we have very empathetic legislators sitting on that committee, is gone. Gone. Is there any other relief? Ron Ramsey. There is an ouster proceeding in Tennessee under Title VIII. That has to be done by the Attorney General's office. When I was trying to find out what other relief we could get in Tennessee, we called the Attorney General's office and talked to him. They go, we don't do ousters. So that's not an option. Civil rights actions. Now this is the civil part of enforcing your civil rights as a civil claim. Unfortunately, although it says deprivation of rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution, when they are done under the color of law, there is absolute judicial immunity. There is a little tiny window where you can get past that immunity, and I've tried it 3 times. I've sued 3 different judges. I keep getting tossed out. The tort, abuse of public office, doesn't exist in Tennessee. They have it in England, they have it in Canada, they don't have it here. Recusal. Oh, how do you get a judge to recuse himself? The request for a judge to recuse himself is made to the judge. There is a fear of retaliation, either now or in the future, either for the litigant or for the attorney. If somebody denies a recusal, now we did get a new law passed, a new rule passed. Used to, you had to wait until the case was over and take the entire case up to the Court of Appeals. We did get a new rule that said that if a judge denies a recusal, you can take a direct appeal. To file that appeal, $1,000. Now, retention elections. This is replace or retain. Your Constitution says that the Supreme Court is to be elected by the qualified voters of the state. Article 6. It's in our Tennessee Constitution. I am going to warn you. I know what's going on up on the Hill, and they are going to try to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot for 2014 to take that out and to make it retention election. I'm going to warn you that's going to happen. Who's going to do that? The legislature is going to do that. Well, I'm limited in my time, but I will tell you, I will share that with you. And actually, Lee probably has the inside thread on that because he's very active in that. Under the Tennessee law, under Title 16, it does say the Supreme Court judges shall be elected. It does say that. Why do we want to elect these judges? Williamson County Bar meets on the first Friday of the month, and in one of our last meetings we had a gentleman there, I think his name is Tom Frost, and Tom Frost actually lobbies for the judges for retention election in the legislature. And we talked about what are the advocates, when they go out and they talk about it, what do they talk about? They talk about two things. They talk about elections are too expensive, and then the second thing they talk about is, these people who sit at judges, they got to have like this superior knowledge, They've got to be real erudites. You can't have just any attorney become a Supreme Court or Court of Appeals justice. That's their argument. But let me tell you what I say. Feet on the street, as an attorney who see those judges, who have to work with those judges, have to deal with those judges, they are out of touch. They are totally 100% out of touch. Not only are you stripped of your right to vote, that is one thing that you have to take to heart and consider because it's taking that away from you. They are out of touch. What kind of power do they have in the judiciary? They have more power than any other branch of government, I will tell you. They can take your children. They can take your home. They can take your money. They can put you in jail. And they police themselves. There is no effective oversight of the judicial branch by any other branch of our government. Our court system in Tennessee is flawed. The decisions are insulated. And I'll tell you, they have this thing in law called abuse of discretion. It means that judges can make all kinds of decisions about what kind of evidence goes in, who your witnesses are, how long the trial takes. They can make all kinds of decisions about your due process rights, and they will be upheld as long as they don't abuse their discretion. They can decide if you're a liar or not. And if they decide you're a liar, it doesn't matter what court you take it to. Every other court is going to say you're a liar. The errors are hidden, just like these judges that I showed you before. How many mistakes do you think Judge Baumgartner and Judge Hagler and Judge Taylor made from the bench before they were finally taken off the bench? The review process is laborious and expensive. It easily takes a year to have your case reviewed by the Court of Appeals. Our judges have too much unchecked power. Too much. I'm telling you, too much. and there is a lack of accountability. The attorneys are subject to the powers that be without the freedom to speak out. And I'm an example. Retaliation, secreted documents and procedures, limited opportunity to improve the system. I am telling you, they have tried to disbar me, okay? And they have tried to disbar me because I spoke out. When I went to the legislature in 2008, within 6 months, like 4 judges filed complaints against me. Crazy, silly stuff. I went through a year, I had to have a trial, and I beat them, okay? That wasn't good enough for them. They had to come back and try to do it again. So there is blatant retaliation against the attorneys who try to speak out. Secreted documents. Attorneys, their licenses are controlled by the Supreme Court. In December of 2012, I was on Channel 4 because we had discovered that this branch that controls the licensure of attorneys were...
Underline.
That too. That they had been secretly communicating by email and had not given those email communications to the attorneys that they were pursuing. So what did we do? We did an open records request. A new great little thing that I have found is you send an open records request to all type of government agencies. You ask for things, and especially emails now, which are so enlightening. They refuse to give them to us. So we filed an open records action with Chancellor Lyle in Davidson County. And we went in and we argued it. And Chancellor Lyle said to the state, you got to give them those emails. And so what does the state of Tennessee do? Now, if they didn't have anything to hide, wouldn't they have just said, okay, nope, Judge, we're not giving them to him. Not giving them to him. They got a stay on releasing those emails to us, and now we have to take that to the Court of Appeals. And the people suffer. Our freedom suffers. Justice suffers. What is a judge?
Does the Freedom of Information Act cover the statewide level too, or is that just federal?
State? We have our own open records. It's called an Open Records Act here. And there is an Open Records Office for the state of Tennessee. The people suffer. Our freedom suffers. What is a judge really supposed to do? A judge is the person who sits there and says, this person says, you know, he stole my pig. And the other guy says, well, I didn't really steal his pig. He gave me the pig, and I gave him $10 for the pig. And what is the judge supposed to do? He is supposed to be a trier of fact. The judge is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter of the fact. All right? And then once the judge has decided the fact, he is to apply the law, all right? That is what he's supposed to do. And people should have that right, and it should be as clean and as simple and as economic as it can be. This is an important thing I found, and especially after Lee sent the email today and made a comment about Nazi Germany. An article was actually published in the 2011 magazine of the American Bar Association, and it talked about this historian William Meneke, and he said, the Nazis gained power by co-opting the justice system through its courts and lawyers. They knew they were dependent on the lawyers operating in the system and wanted to bend them to their way of thinking. They worked at getting sympathetic leadership in the organized bar, initiated a loyalty oath to Hitler as part of the admission to practice, developed incentives to gain cooperation, and heavy-handed and brutal disincentives for those who oppose the system. Now, we have to say a loyalty oath to the Supreme Court when we get our license. We can be disbarred if we say anything that takes the judicial system into disrespect. There are lots of things in which people can be court appointed for, okay? That is an incentive to support the system, and I have seen that, especially in our juvenile courts, which is a whole nother discussion. A whole nother discussion for you is our juvenile court system. But people are appointed by the judges who make the judges most happy. So there certainly are financial incentives to support the court system. There's a few things that that I have posted that kind of give you more information on this. On YouTube, I have a station set up. It's called Judicial Reform Now, all together in one word. And a lot of these videos, the legislative talks that we've done, a lot of the news clips that we've had. We've been on Channel 4 several times, and some of the legislative clippings, some courtroom videos. I actually got a courtroom video of a judge having an ex parte communication when I wasn't there, so that was pretty good. Now, I'm also going to encourage you, when you go to the poll in August, to vote replace. Vote replace. We need 55% vote to remove the Court of Appeals in the Supreme Court. In Williamson County, I didn't check the state, check with the State Election Commission, but I did check Williamson County. The last time this happened, just by happenstance, 35% of the people voted replace. So, and most people go in and they just don't even think about it. So I would like to see, and I would like to encourage people to pass the word to vote replace. If that happens, that will send your message loud and clear that you no longer agree with retention election. Does anybody have any specific questions? Yes?
Yes, you've just done an excellent job of corroborating why two independent watchdog agencies elected Tennessee as the most corrupt judicial system in the country. And this was in competition with Chicago and New Jersey and California, which I thought would come out on top. But these two agencies, independent agencies,
Yeah. And I'll...
elected Tennessee as the most corrupt judicial system in the country.
And I will tell you, when I showed you the leaders of the Board of Judicial Conduct, I go to their meetings, and at their last meeting in February, they were talking about they had been to the National American Adjudicatory Society meeting. And they said, oh, you know, they just love to tell the stories about Tennessee. We've got more stories than anybody else. I'm like, and you're proud of that? So I agree. Yes?
We're number one.
We're number one.
I've only lived here 2 years. Are there any honest judges in Tennessee?
You know, I go to courts all throughout Middle Tennessee. I've been to Clarksville. I go all the way down to Grundy County. There are some judges that do a good job. There are some judges that do a good job, that want to do a good job, that try to follow the law, that try to keep their courtrooms managed. But I will tell you, we have to stay on top of them because it's what they call black robe fever, okay? It doesn't take long for them to be on the bench and they start getting their control and their power. And if attorneys are afraid to stand up to them and keep them in line, it takes good attorneys to do this too, then they all start kind of sinking and drifting away from what they need to be doing. Yes?
You made an excellent presentation. We tend to be a little bit more active than people in this room than the average person. What is the next step? What do we do to fix this other than vote to replace? Is there some kind of legislation that would be worked through? Do you have any favorable representatives that are on board? What do we do?
There are favorable representatives, and I can, as I said, I can organize those and give you that information. There are a few things that when we first went to the legislature we asked for. We did ask for the legislature to secure their own liaison. We think somebody needs to be reviewing these judicial complaints other than the judiciary. Okay, so whether or not they actually sit down and review every complaint, but the legislature needs somebody. They need somebody who's going to take a look at them. Jeff Bivens, that I showed you a picture of, he actually went to the legislature and lobbied against us while we were in there, and which is totally unconstitutional too. The judiciary should not be lobbying. We had asked that courtrooms have audio or visual already built into the courtroom. Now, juvenile courts have that. These days, it would not take much to have every courtroom set up with audio anyway, maybe not video, but so that if a litigant goes in and let's say they couldn't afford a court reporter or they didn't have a court, well, and let me tell you why. part of this issue started with me against this one particular judge because I was went to court in Williamson County, and I was up against attorneys, kind of, I'll call him a good old boy attorney, and I was asking for something that I had a very legitimate reason for asking for it. And this judge from the bench said, "What do you do? What are you trying to do? Be a jerk?" Now, I did not have a recorder with me, and there was no court reporter in the courtroom. These days, I always carry a digital recorder. Everywhere I go, I have a digital recorder. I lay it on the table. I let them know it's on. All the judges around here know I record. We need recordings. We need recordings in the courtroom because even if there's a court reporter and the judges who scream and lose their temper and get up from their table and lean over and yell at litigants, you can't see that or hear that on a transcript. You cannot, we need to have recordings. The legislature needs a liaison. We need to find good judges to run. We need to look at the judges, who's running, who needs to be replaced in every county, and we need to be active about that. And I would tell you, I don't see, I've been involved in judicial elections since 1994. I see very few citizens actually involved in that process.
I just wanted to point out, I'm sure a lot of us saw an example of this bad behavior with the Trayvon Martin case recently, where the judge, who was just very condescending and one-sided, made it very difficult for the defense to...
Definitely. And that happens. That's real. That happens. Yes?
Did you mention that the Court of the Judiciary, which is now renamed the Court of Judicial Conduct, was all appointed by judges, still appointed by judges, that the Attorney General is appointed by the Supreme Court.
Yes.
The disciplinary body for lawyers is appointed by the Supreme Court.
Right.
And the Supreme Court is not elected.
Right.
It is appointed. So we've got an unelected body with absolute control of determining what's constitutional and what's not. They don't have the authority to do that.
Right. And to show that our Supreme Court insulates all of their constitutional decisions, they are the ultimate authority. So when I was looking up retention, I mean, this is John J. Hooker is probably known by several of you for going for the retention, going against retention election. He's not the first one to do it. Back in 1994, two other attorneys, well, John J. Hooker and Louis Laska back then, was trying to get the election commissioner to put them on the ballot because Penny White was not going to be on the ballot. And so they tried to put them on the ballot, and they refused to do it. And that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they said, no, we're not unconstitutional what we're doing. So so that's the insulation. And until we can get the legislators the legislators should remove, under Title VI, should remove all the Supreme Court justices because they are right now in the violation of the Constitution. They should, the legislators have to be empowered. They have to feel in themselves that they have some authority here. They need to do removals. They need to do impeachments. They need to point their fingers at the justices and say, y'all are violating the Constitution. Yes?
Just on a slightly different subject, I can't get any information on Sharia finance in Tennessee. Can you tell us how the legislature, are they know about it, and not many people know about it, but it does exist?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. You want to get...
Sharia finance, they're absolutely doing contracts in Tennessee.
What?
Sharia finance contracts.
Contract
What?
law based on Sharia law. It's not
Sharia law.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we find out?
Well, I mean, anything the state has is subject to open records, okay? So if you can figure out either sometimes you have to start fishing, okay? You might have to go pull the budget. You might have to figure out what department, ask what contract, do an Open Records Act for contracts with the Department of Transportation in the last 24 months, okay? Now, they have a minimum charge. I mean, they can charge you something for open records, but that's what we did with the Board of Professional Responsibility. We asked for all emails since 2007. Of course, they didn't give us all emails since 2007. They said you can come over and look at them. And we had an attorney go over and look at them, and we happened to scroll through just by chance, see this malicious ex parte email, and then we knew. Okay, so it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. But once you find that needle, you know what to ask for. Yeah.
Mention the fact on the speaker, the COJ is not subject to open records.
That is true. The complaints filed against judges and complaints filed against attorneys are not subject to open records. So let me add another layer to that. Because they thought they could come and disbar me, I said, well, and for some crazy things like really old cases and stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, you know what? It's kind of, the whole ethics thing is sort of gray. So I'm going to start filing complaints on attorneys of things that I think could be unethical and see what they do. And so this one particular judge that I told you about, who is now an attorney, I filed a complaint against him. And I filed a complaint against him. I have a case with him. I filed a complaint against him for something that he had complained against me. Okay, basically the same thing, right? And no, not unethical. Not unethical, they said. And so I sent him a second letter, and I says, okay, I just want to make sure it is not unethical for an attorney to tell a client to violate a court order. They will not even respond to that. Then I said, because in that system, they have the Supreme Court appoints people to sit as judges and to sit as reviewing committees and all this. And I said, well, I want to know the reviewing committee who reviewed and said that that was not unethical. I can't know. They won't tell me. So you have this insulated secret society that you can't get information of that creates its own rules as it goes. And it's the same thing with the COJ. But as far as contract, you can go find contracts. Like I said, sometimes it's like starting with a needle in a haystack, but once you get one lead, then you know where to go with it.
Connie, of the 50 witnesses we had for all those committees, all those years, about 15 of them were lawyers that had judicial retaliation because they'd asked the judge to recuse himself. Talk about Cynthia's case, where she asked the judge to recuse herself.
Well, the attorneys who face these issues, we all seem to somehow come in contact with each other. A friend of mine who is also an attorney who does a lot of fighting with DCS, the state, whenever they see constitutional rights get trampled. She represented, this was down there in Coffee County, and she represented a woman, and it had to do with the custody of her child. And she found out that a DCS worker had called the judge on Sunday night and asked him, excuse me, got that wrong. Her husband's attorney called the judge on Sunday night and asked him to give an order to remove the children. And they found it in the DCS records, found notes about this phone call. Well, when she found that out, she filed a motion for the judge to recuse himself. And at first he refused to do it. Ultimately, he did recuse himself. It went to another judge. She found out that that judge was a fishing buddy with the other guy's lawyer, and so she asked that judge to recuse himself. So ultimately, those judges did recuse themselves, but what happened after that? She got a complaint filed against her and had to have a hearing as to whether or not it was unethical to ask judges to recuse themselves. And that's one of our videos actually on the YouTube station. So the retaliation is real. It's real. So I would like to, as I said, I think you being aware of the judicial elections, becoming informed and knowledgeable about who's running, what you can do to support them or to support other people, vote replace. Contact your legislatures, tell them that you want more accountability in the judicial department, you want some of their powers stripped from them, you want a liaison, you want them to know what's going on. That's the key thing. You want your legislators to know what's going on in the judicial branch. Janice, you have something else? Thank you.